Hi, I'm Don Meyer, the Director of Training with the Erie Bearings Company. Today's short video is going to be on how to assemble a spherical roller bearing adapter mount type. Okay, let's take a quick look at the components that we're going to be using today. We have our SAF block and mounting hardware. Then we have our spherical tapered bore bearing, our adapter sleeve, the lock nut and washer, a set of LER triple seal rings, the feeler gauges that we're going to be using for setting the clearance, our spanner wrench, some shafting, and then you need some manufacturer's radial clearance reduction chart. Okay, so here's our shafting that we're going to be mounting our bearing onto. And for all bearing installations, you should check your shafting for nicks, any burrs, and then verify the dimensional accuracy. The first step then is to take the LER seal, and we're going to mount the first one into here. Now I've marked on my shaft where I need this bearing to sit, so I'm going to bring the seal up to that position, and then I'm going to take the adapter sleeve with the threading to the outside and install that onto the shaft as well. Okay, the next step is to check the internal radial clearance of the spherical bearings. As I refer to the manufacturer's chart, I should be between 3.7 and 4.7 thou. The internal radial clearance on an unmounted bearing here is going to be between the roller and the outside ring. So I'm going to start out by checking about 4.5. And I can't quite get that one in there, so I'm going to step it down to 4. See how this one fits. It is snug, but that's what it should be to get the accurate radial internal clearance, so I'm going to call this one 4 thou. Alright, the next step is to mount the bearing on the adapter sleeve. And we're going to be obviously starting with the large bore of the inner race. Alright, you got to get this as tight as possible here. We've left the lock washer off for this step. And then the next step would then be to take the lock nut with the chamfered face toward the bearing. We're going to tighten that. Start out getting this hand tight. After you get it hand tight, that's when you're going to want to use a spanner wrench. I'm going to use this here to steady my shafting. Put on my spanner wrench and get this nice and snug. And the next step then would be to check the clearance once more. Alright, now that we've got the nut tight and we've got it tight onto the shaft, we're going to go ahead and check the clearance. Now this is a C3 clearance for this particular bearing. I started out with an unmounted clearance of 4 thou, and referring to my chart, I should have a reduction of anywhere from 1.5 to 2 thou. So I'm going to see if I can get 1.5 thou, which means if I use my 2.5 feeler gauge, if it's tight in here, and that is very snug in there. I just get that through, so I'm going to go ahead and say that we've got it reduced properly. Okay, now I have to remove the lock nut because I'm going to install the lock washer and then reinstall the lock nut. Now just to kind of break this nut loose, I'm going to put my spanner wrench back on here. Break that loose. Go ahead and take this off. We've got to be careful that nothing moves. So we remove the nut. Alright. And then we're going to take the lock washer here with the slot towards the shaft and turn this here, and you'll see what I'm trying to line up here now. I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. I'm going to reinstall the lock nut the same way, the chamfer face towards the bearing. As you see on this lock washer, there's a series of tangs here. Now, we don't want to tighten this anymore at this point yet. We got to inspect this and see if we have a tang that lines up perfectly with one of these grooves here. Alright, and as I turn around, I see actually right here I do have one. Now if one of these did not line up, then what you want to do is take your wrench and you just want to turn it a little bit more, and you're going to see that there's 4 grooves on here, and we're just going to turn it a little bit more until one of these tangs lines up with one of those grooves. Well, right now this is the one that we would go ahead and peen over to lock that onto there. Okay, then so after you would bend over this tang onto the groove, alright, we're going to go ahead and install the other LER seal. And then at this point, what we would be doing is we're going to go ahead and grease this bearing. Now the bearing itself would be packed with grease, and it's always good practice to go ahead and apply grease around both of these seals as well. For the housing itself, I'm going to go ahead and just install this into the housing. Before I do, I just kind of want to point out though that there is a stabilizing ring. Now for the stabilizing ring, whether you choose to use it or not depends upon your application, whether you need a fixed or a floating bearing. For this one here, we're going to leave the stabilizing ring in, so this will be a fixed bearing. Alright, and you replace that stab ring between the outer race and the lock nut itself. Alright, and I gotta move this seal over one. Okay. Then the next step would be to pack the housing with grease. For typical applications, the housing is packed 1/3 to 1/2 full, depending upon the operating conditions. So we go ahead and pack this housing here with grease, reinstall the cover, and put on our lock washers and nuts. So that concludes the assembly of an SAF adapter mounted pillow block. Following these simple steps will lead to a properly mounted bearing. Please contact Erie Bearings for all your bearing needs. We'd be happy to help with all your applications.